This is the Laxey wheel in the Isle of Man. It looks at first sight as if it ought to be driven by a giant Victorian steam engine, but it isn't. In fact, it's a water wheel, the largest water wheel in the world. What's more, it's a rare one, a pitch backshot wheel, which means that it goes backwards. It's 72 feet in diameter and 6 foot across. The axle is 17 foot long and weighs 10 tons. And it began work in 1854. Its job was to pump water out of the great Laxey mine by means of a series of 16 moving rods, which transmitted the power generated by the wheel along a stone viaduct to an enormous angle rod, and so eventually to the rods that pumped the water from the bottom of the mine itself. The great Laxey mine ceased operations during the Depression in 1929. All the rods except one were sold for scrap. Without the wheel, the mine shafts soon were flooded beyond recovery. Parts broke off, some were stolen, others just rusted away. The mining of lead, silver and zinc, for which the Isle of Man had been famous for the best part of 1,000 years, had finally come to an end. But one man, Mr. Edward Neal, decided that it could not be lost forever. As a result of his efforts, the wheel still turns today. Every morning, the sluice gate is opened, water gathered from a series of lathes or ponds has been collected in a giant cistern, and the vast machine stands ready to move. The water races up the pipe within the high stone column and is fed out across a screen to the buckets. The great cast-iron Isle of Man crest stands in attendance. The wheel begins to turn, all 150 tons of it, capable of generating 200 horsepower. By running backwards, the water in the bucket does the maximum amount of work before it falls out into the pit below. The pitch backshot principle was adopted by the designer Roger Casement because high winds would have blown a lot of water out of the buckets if they'd moved in a forward direction. In its day, the full weight of water would always keep it rotating backwards, although today, with less water available, a strong northerly gale can actually cause it to turn the other way. It's easy to imagine the scene on the 27th of September 1854, when 4,000 people gathered in bright sunshine to see the wife of the governor, Lady Isabella Hope, christen it the Lady Isabella. They would have been able to see very clearly how a series of angle shafts connect together and slowly convert the rotating movement of the wheel to a steady back and forward thrust. This drive is then conveyed to the giant rods as 200 horsepower traveled forward almost magically up the hillside to force 250 gallons of water a minute out of the mine shaft 1,800 feet below. It was memories like this that inspired Edward Neal to get the wheel going again.
When the mines closed, the wheel went derelict immediately, you see, because it was closed for 9 years. And it hadn't turned all that time. The water courses were cut off, and the top platform went absolutely rotten, derelict, and nothing happened during that 9 years. And after that period, I negotiated with the owners of the wheel to take it over. When I salvaged it, the whole wheel had to be completely overhauled, and we had to disconnect off the pumping gear from underground, because if it had started the wheel up with the pumping gear attached, it would have caused considerable damage to the wheel.
What was your sort of feelings like when you first saw that wheel turn again after all those derelict years?
Well, it was a great enterprise. We need to think that it was possible to have the wheel running after it's been stopped for 9 years, but I really looked more to the value it would be as a publicity line and to the good of the Isle of Man and to Laxey.
A very narrow stone flight of steps, strictly one person at a time in my case, takes you up the outside of the casement, which contains the pipe through which the water flows to the top under the pressure of the main system. At the top, with its wooden platform, the visitor gets a novel view of some of the machinery in action. From this angle, it becomes almost menacing. That's called a rocker post, with a pull of about 11.5 tons behind it, so it's best not to get your hand stuck in it. And as you go to the very end of the platform, there's a breathtaking view of the countryside, and a real chance to see finally how Roger Casement, in 1854, made 336 buckets, produced 200 horsepower by the simple action of gravity. So, the Lady Isabella, just quite simply the largest wheel in the world. And it still works, on a drop of water. 50 years ago, when the mines closed, it stopped turning. It started again on a regular basis back in 1970. Let's hope it goes on turning for a long while to come.